Hello, everyone. Today I'm doing something a little bit different from what I usually do, which is a sort of draw with me, but also it's a voiceover because I cannot do it in real time for the life of me. And in this case, I'm doing a small sketch portrait for the character Elsa from Fear and Hunger. And to start off, well, I've already started because apparently I do not mess around. I just keep in mind where the head of my character is facing, but also the position of the viewer. So my viewer is going to be positioned a little bit lower. So I just keep that in mind and make my character's head perspective be from a lower angle. So that's why I made the jawline look kind of flat in certain areas. I make the ears also go down a little bit. And I really do this sporadically. Um, randomly, I don't really think that much about it. I just want to place my elements before I go in with details and things like that. As for the clothing, I'm not really doing that many details. I'm just putting everything in the place I want it to be. If I want to add more detail later on, then I do so when I'm rendering or coloring. And I feel like it's a good practice to do details later after you're done with the actual sketch. Okay, so now I move on to doing the facial features. This is, well, objectively the most fun part for me, since Ulsa is from the continent of Abyssinia, which is based on real-life Africa. I keep that in mind when I draw his features, since usually black people have flatter nose bridges and their lip and nose areas more protruding than the rest of their face. So I just keep both of those things in mind. Also look at his character art, his splash art, and just take his features and then apply them onto my drawing, right? I feel like one of the most important parts to getting a character right is to look at their eyebrows and just try to draw them as similarly as possible, since that's part of a really big part of their appearance, right? I feel like now that I'm adding in the mustache, it does really look like him, but I guess that means I'm doing a good job. In this case, I'm doing more deep set eyes for him, so instead of having the eyes end right at the edge of his face, since he's facing a little bit toward the side, I draw them a little bit inwards in comparison to the brow bone and the cheekbone. And I also draw the other eye, also keeping in mind the perspective I chose, which is a little bit lower. And also keeping in mind that the face is not a flat 2D element. It's a little bit kind of like a rounded sheet of paper. So it just has this kind of round quality that's more noticeable in side angles. Just kind of hard to explain, but I'm trying to explain it the best I can. And here I just do some more refinements before I add some more details in. I end this by doing the rest of the head and also tilting it around, like the whole drawing. This is for composition purposes. I just want him to look a little bit more imposing, but also as I mentioned, he's a lot like a very cynical character, and like he has a ton of dialogues that show this trait throughout the game. So I just wanted to add this little edge, or like show this kind of superiority complex through the pose and his general expression, kind of like he's looking down on you. But also, he's a really cool character, so that's why I wanted to draw him. So you may see me do this a lot, which is using the Liquify tool. I do think it's a really good tool that you can use to just move everything around without having to actually redraw it, and it's just one of the marvels of digital drawing. Right here, I really could not decide on the shape of the hat. In some drawings, it looked flat on top, and some other drawings it didn't. In the end, I went with the flatter top, but in other drawings, I have drawn him in the like round top hat, and I do think it might look a little bit better. I just went with this for this drawing specifically. here I'm going around and erasing some parts that are overlapping, just fixing some pretty obvious mistakes in the sketch, just to save myself from having to fix them later on while I'm coloring. And I think it's just a good practice. I don't do a lot of fixing, just things that look very obvious. And I generally like to keep that little kind of messy quality of the lines, since it adds texture and character to the art. So here's the fun part. This is where I start shading. People usually do the flat color and then the shading on top of the flat color, but something I've learned from art school, as well as my own experience as an artist in the art industry, is that it looks much better to do the shading first and then a color layer on top of that as an overlay. It looks really nice, and I do have a lot of experience with it, so I just do it on absolutely every drawing. And I'm doing sort of a side light. The light is not hitting him completely from the front. It's kind of off to his left side and our right side. And I'm doing a pink light from the front side, which also doesn't hit him from the front. It just kind of is in the same position as the viewer. I don't know how to explain that. And I chose pink and blue since, I considered three things: the color of his clothes, the color of the atmosphere, but also the color of his skin, since Osa has darker skin and his clothes are kind of really duckling yellow. I did this pink and blue type of contrast because it'll match well with the clothes, but also his skin is pretty dark, which reflects light a lot, and this can make drawings look really good since it's more reflective of light. Now I'm going in with a kind of peach color. Actually, this is more red than orange. It just looks orange due to the blue and purple base I've used, but if you look up to the left, you can tell it's red, just the lighter red. And I'm just using that in areas where I want my primary highlight to be. The blue highlights, I want them to be there, but I don't want them to be the main light source. I want them to serve as kind of like a backlight, but also add a little bit of atmosphere. here's where I start off adding in my colors, like the character's colors. And I basically color pick from the character reference. I don't do anything fancy, and then I just set it as an overlay, as I mentioned before. In some occasions, it's better to set it as a Heartlight layer rather than an overlay layer, just because Heartlight shows the hue of the colors you chose better, but overlay lets the shading layer show more, so there's more color variation. In this case, I believe I did choose the overlay version, but in some cases the Heartlight just looks better. And I'm emphasizing my blue light a little bit more, just not too much. It's a little less saturated. I'm just doing this with a very grayish blue and going in some areas, right? Defining the planes of the face, since faces have tons of planes in them, and a little bit on the clothing, hat, etc. Yeah. And now I'm going to add a gradient layer, like a gradient map. This is just to spice the colors up a little bit, maybe add, in some cases I use it to add coherence to the colors, but in this case I'm just doing it to mix it up, change my original colors a little bit, maybe to match the character better. And as you can see, when I put it as an overlay, the skin tone as an overlay, it just looks so much better. And now I'm continuing to add in the colors for the character. Here I'm just adding my final drops of color. I mean, I'm gonna add some more later, I think, but this is just the main part. And after I do this, I just wait. Okay, no, now we're gonna do it. Okay, after I do that, I just merge all of the layers of color I did and then set it as an overlay, as I mentioned. Then I duplicated the layer and then set it as a hard light, just so I can show the hue of the colors of Osa's design better. And here I might do some more adjustments. For example, I think I wanted to change the background color here, so I'm just making a selection of every part of color of the character and then creating a background layer in the same layer as the overlay to make it a little bit grayer, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Just so the character, like the background doesn't outshine the character. And now we're on to the fun part, which is merging everything, then selecting the color layer, putting it on top of the line art layer, setting the saturation to almost the max, the luminosity, just lowering it, but not till it gets to black, and merge all of those layers. And now we're ready to start rendering, pretty much. I've been leaning more towards rendering with lines lately. I used to do a lot of airbrushing and just using the blur tool, but I found that lines just add more texture to the drawing, and I feel like texture is just a really underrated part of digital art. People don't think about it a lot when it comes to digital art, I've noticed, but it does add to the look of the drawing. And also, it just leans more into my actual art style, like what I do traditionally, and it just looks neat in general. Right here, I'm just emphasizing the light that's hitting him from the left side, and here you can see me adding a light to his lower eyelid, and that is a bounce light. It's not light that's hitting him directly, but rather a bounce light from the light that's hitting his nose, and I'm making it a little bit less noticeable since it's not going to be as strong. And here I am adding a light that's hitting him directly from his iris color. And I'm also changing the color of the iris since that got lost when I merged all the layers together. regards to what I mentioned before, right here I'm adding gray but also pinkyish highlights on many areas. This color is, well, it looks good. It looks good. It looks, I don't know what to say, bro. I don't know what to say. It just looks good, and I put it in, like, on the skin, and then I add blues, greens, yellows, oranges, bounce lights from the shirt and the eyes, since I also mentioned that darker skin is more reflective. And I'm also emphasizing the front lights, since I already mentioned I want them to be the focus in comparison to the blue and yellow light that's coming from the left side. And I don't really add too many. I don't want to go ham with the white highlight. I'm just using it sparingly, defining my planes again. Many planes, and yeah, that's it. And I'm doing what I mentioned before of blending with lines instead of doing it with an airbrush or a blur tool. It just looks much more organic. It doesn't look that soft, but it does add a lot of texture to the image. And now I'm pretty much done with the skin. From this point forward, I just add the light, which is like really prominent on the skin, onto other surfaces like the hair, the hat, and the clothes. And I'm also making his hair texture more noticeable. I know he doesn't have that much hair texture on the reference. I just thought it looked good and I added it in. And yeah, it's just, I don't add too many highlights since his hair, well, I wanted it to be more on the coily side, and when hair has more texture, it usually doesn't, I mean, it does reflect light, but as a group of strands of hair, it doesn't. So I'm not adding a super bright highlight on his hair, just a regular highlight and just keeping it like that. For most elements on this piece in particular, I'm not doing many color changes. I'm just keeping the original colors from doing the whole overlay, gradient map, and the original palette. The only parts where I did like really not big but noticeable color changes were the skin and the hair. But as you can see, for the clothing and the hat, I just kept the original colors. I just refined the details a little bit, defined 3D shapes as well with shadows in areas where I didn't add any, and also kind of changing the contrast too, so that the area where his face is the most noticeable. Man, I think he looks good. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I think he just looks good. I'm just adding more backlight here. Like, I don't know what to say. And this makes him look more 3D, I guess. And I think I'm like close to, oh no, never mind. Okay. I'm shading his a necklace. No, that's not a necklace. That's yeah, you guys get what I'm saying. And just shading things that I forgot to shade before. Okay, now I'm doing the same thing I did before, which is select the background, and now I'm just gonna add some more color to it. The brush I used for most of this piece is called Oil Brush. I'm using it right now on the video, and I'm gonna link it down below. It really is a good texture brush. I use this a lot for backgrounds, but also for like when I do the first layer, because as I mentioned, I like a lot of value variation when it comes to the background and stuff. And here I'm just kind of blending Osa into the background with this brush as well. This is just to show that his clothes that are being directly hit by the light are also bouncing light right out. So it's kind of like a bloom effect. If you play video games, you probably know what that is. And I just make the colors on some of his clothes bleed into the background. It makes it look kind of painterly or dreamy, I guess. And then I add another gradient map. You can really never have enough gradient maps. I added some of those. In this case, I put it as an overlay layer, I think. But I think I didn't like it, or did I? Did I like it? No, I think I'm gonna change it again. Oh yeah, okay. I'm changing the saturation now. Just to make the yellow more noticeable, as well as some changes on the skin. Wait, no, I think I'm gonna lower it again. Yeah, I lowered it again. Interesting. Oh yeah, okay, now I know what I'm doing. I made the saturation higher on other parts of the drawing, but I'm removing it on the shirt because it has a lot of hue variation, and if it is more saturated, it's just gonna be way too noticeable. And I just want to make the saturation higher for other parts of the drawing, not that part specifically. And now I'm just gonna do a color dodge layer, I think. Yep. And I'm going in with a lighter yellow and just adding it onto some areas like the eyes, which I've already mentioned. I wanted them to look more noticeable. I'm also adding it onto the backlight, and also I'm not gonna make it too bright because otherwise it might take away the attention from other areas that I wanted to highlight more. And this is just a vignette effect. I do a dark color, and then with the gradient tool or the airbrush tool, I just make an area with white that is gonna be like the area where you can see the most, right? And I just set this as a multiply layer, and I adjust it in a way that I think looks good and also reflects what areas I want to highlight. And at this point, we're pretty much done, I think. Okay, I'm doing something else. I don't know what I'm doing now. Okay, I'm creating a selection, and then in this area, I'm gonna make the contrast higher and the brightness higher. So this is the area that I want to be more important in a sense, and then I'm going to select that same mask, invert it, and then do the opposite. So I'm lowering the contrast and lowering the brightness. So it kind of does the opposite effect, so it draws in less attention. And we're pretty much done, I think. If we're done, we're just gonna cut to the final. Thank you!